Welcome to this session, and the title, that time when I was asked to protect God's Marines. If that title didn't bring you to this podcast, then I'm not sure what will, to be honest. And please welcome Andy Brown. I've recruited some strange titles over my 30 years in recruitment, but the title of Chief Security Officer for the Jesuit Refugee Service. Hey Andy, how you doing?
Yeah, not bad, Nick. Thanks very much.
Good. So a man who lives in Edinburgh but works from the Vatican HQ. How did that come about?
Well, it's a bit of a strange story. I did my 30 years in policing, and as part of that, I lecture quite a lot on hostage negotiation and kidnap, and challenged a bit of some of the UK government thinking around about kidnap. And at a conference down in London, met an Irishman, so a Scotsman in England meeting an Irishman. And usual, exchange cards, thought nothing more of it. 2 months later on, was back in London. My wife was at the garden party with her brother, and I got a phone call from this Irishman to say, "Remember me? Can you help, Andy? We've got a priest kidnapped in Afghanistan." And I said, "Yeah, I can help." And from that moment on, I then got a phone call from Father Peter in Rome, and then started my work with the Jesuits. I went to Rome about a week later. Was introduced to all the fellow Jesuits as Mr. Brown, the expert kidnapper. And it was then
not the kidnapper, the guy that fixes kidnappers, obviously.
But that was the introduction. Was here's Mr. Brown, the expert kidnapper, and then met the head of the gendarmerie at the Vatican, and he knew everything about me. And then I said, right, well, this is what I'm going to do. And trained a team in Afghanistan from Edinburgh, and then very carefully and skillfully negotiated the release of the priest from the Taliban, which took us 8.5 months.
And he was safe and well at the end of it?
Yes, safe and well. He was actually, to a large extent, he was looked after, which was great, because the whole thing was about money, and we didn't, our policy is not to pay ransom. So it was a difficult negotiation, but it was one that succeeded. And where was I when he was released from captivity? I was in church in Edinburgh. And then when I went back to Rome to do the debrief with the Jesuits, I was invited after the meeting to go to St. Peter's Basilica with myself and Father Peter. And we had a small discussion. I said a prayer. And then he said to me, he said, "You know, Andy, you came from nowhere to help us, and you've taken us from the darkness into the light. And that takes something special." Now, for me, it was a bit of one of these moments where you feel that tingling down your spine and think, wow, this is actually quite significant for me. And for me, it was very much my calling, and I've been working with these guys ever since.
And what's the and I mean the Jesuits? I mean, you kind of know the name, and historically you know the name as well. How far does the Jesuit order go back?
So it goes back to the 1540s. So there was a Spanish soldier, St. Ignatius, formed the Society of Jesus. It's the oldest order within the Catholic faith, and the Jesuits are renowned worldwide, particularly around about education. Particularly around about going to places where they walk with the poor and they accompany the poor, and they advocate on behalf of the poor, and they go into places that nobody else will go into. We're usually first in and last out.
I think I read the Jesuits are in 56 countries, many hostile.
Yeah. So we're in a lot of hostile environments, difficult environments. But because of the way that we operate, because we are probably the halfway house between a church mission and an NGO, we very much integrate ourselves into community. We work with the community, and we take that community through the difficult times that they endure, and that causes us difficulties. And my role in keeping them safe is to give them some of the techniques that I've learned over 3 decades in policing, to say, okay, well, I'm not going to say we can't do this, but how about it we do it just slightly differently?
Yeah, and you said it, and you said it was your calling. But I mean, you've worked with your own consulting company, Mind Over Matter, where you talk about immersive leadership, and you've been helping, I think, GB Sports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What is the difference between working with the big commercial organisations and working with an order of faith, obviously?
I think working with an order of faith, it gives you that. A lot of it gives you that humility. You know, I mean, I went to Nigeria to set up the mission in Nigeria, and you know, took a small football. I can't play football to save myself, but I sat in a refugee camp, gave the football to the kids and showed them how to make goals out of jackets, and do like all of us did in the UK. And I sat next to one of the mothers, and she was crying, and I said to her, I said, I hope these are tears of joy. And she goes, yes. She said, I lost my 3 daughters 2 months ago when they were killed by Boko Haram, just for going to school. And for me, you just think, wow, these people would give you the shirt off their back. And you think, and I left there thinking, I'm really grateful for what I've got, and I'm really fortunate to live in a country where safety and security is something that we take for granted every day.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? When you talk about people losing their children, and we've got children, and we all both have children.
Yeah.
Thought of losing your child, but we moan about first world problems here, but they are first world problems.
Yeah, and I think the difference with commercial and teaching the Olympic coaches is that you can give them that reality, because when you run an immersive exercise, they'll go, nah, there's no way that happened, Andy. Well, no, this is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And that gives them that just, wow, okay, that reality check.
And I was, when we were talking about the refugee crisis, and obviously the Jesuits are, as you say, are helping across 56 countries. But I wrote down, right now, you've got refugees landing in Italy, you've got refugees crossing the Straits of Gibraltar, you've got refugees crossing the Channel from France to the UK, from Syria being bombed. Right now, the Israeli-Palestinian wars. I mean, how many people are displaced? Because it seems to me like there's lots, and how the hell do you stop it when there are so many people being displaced?
Well, it's you've got hundreds of thousands, millions of people displaced every single year, and it moves very, very quickly. So I mean, a good example is Myanmar. Myanmar had a period of stability, and then beginning of February there's a military coup takes over the government, and very, very quickly people are starting to be killed. People protest against that and resist some of the changes that have come in. And if you or I were sitting at home and suddenly people are being shot in the street, and your village is being bombed, you're not going to stay there with your family. You're going to flee. But where do you flee to? And what happens is they'll flee to the border, and then suddenly other countries go, oh, wait a minute, we can't let all these displaced people come into our country, because how do we look after them? So suddenly you get people that are almost trapped, and then you get makeshift camps being set up, and a lot of it is the international community that recognise that and are able to step in. But by stepping in, you've got to navigate through all the government restrictions to be able to do that. So it's really, really difficult. And I sometimes speak to people that think, no, refugees should stay in their own country, and you think, well, yeah, that would be fair enough if they've got a government that looks after their people, where there's not a lot of violence. But where you don't have that, you say to them, well, what would you do if that was your family?
I presume each country, I mean, Scotland has taken in many refugees, the UK has taken in many, but eventually it seems that populations turn against refugees. I mean, we've seen it in, you've seen it, I mean, we've seen it here in Scotland where local people turn against, over what they consider to be too many refugees coming in. And, in the situation with Germany taking in 1 million refugees, etc. But it's a perception, isn't it, that these refugees are coming here for a better life, when actually most of them are coming here just so they can survive.
And a lot of them bring a lot of skills. One of the things that a lot of our displaced people and refugees did during the pandemic is we had refugees in camps making face masks for the host community. We were making bars of soap to make sure that we could comply with the hygiene regulations in terms of stopping the spread of the pandemic. So they're very quick and very innovative in doing stuff, but want to give back to that community that's hosted them. So for me, it's true humanity, and it's sometimes we need to take that step back and have that empathic approach to say, well, wait a minute, what would I do if I was in their shoes?
And is that an education thing for, I suppose, an education thing for our children as well, to make sure they understand?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Both you and I have got kids, and when you go to the supermarket, oh, Daddy, I want another toy, and Daddy, I want a toy. When you say to them, well, do you know that some children don't have toys? And they look at you and think, okay, right. So, and I just try to give them a bit of balance in life, and I think that's really important for their upbringing.
Yeah. Go back to the Jesuits for a minute. God's Marines. I know it's their nickname, and everybody looking at this is going to think, what the hell is God's Marines? But where did it come from?
So it came from the fact that St. Ignatius, he was a soldier in Spain, and then he encountered a lot of things that led him to form the Society of Jesus. And if you peel the onion back a wee back to the core of it, a lot of that was about the Jesuits going out into the world and saying, well, this is what we do as Christians, and this is our life, and it was to help to educate others as to that type of lifestyle. And as you know, we've got many different faiths right across the world these days, and it's how these different faiths can live in harmony.
Okay, yeah, very good. And what for you? Obviously, you also teach leadership, and coming back to the business world, I suppose now, and the Jesuit order is obviously one side of your life. But you've been teaching leadership skills all over the world. Have you found that doing this role now with the Jesuits has given you a different set of skills that you learnt with obviously 30 years in the police as a internationally renowned negotiator, hostage negotiator, etc. So has it given you an added set of skills?
Yes, it's given me a different perspective. A lot of people, when they look at people of faith, can't quite understand some of the logic behind it. So it's allowed me to look at the different aspect of that between secular organisations and organisations of faith. And I think one of the biggest things that I've learned, and certainly as a negotiator, is that there's a reason that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we don't use them in that proportion. We're driven by targets. Very a capitalist organisation say, right, we've got to make money, but how much money do you need? How many targets do you need? And where you actually, particularly during the pandemic, where people are struggling with their mental health, it's really important that we learn to actively listen to people, to pick up on when our friends or our work colleagues might just not be quite right, and to say, okay, is everything okay? So our ability to actively listen, to empathise with people is really important. But it's something I think has been lost through this drive of targets and that work ethic. And I think now there's an opportunity to bring that back.
Yeah, well, I suppose the pandemic is certainly from a point of view of mental health. I think the pandemic, everybody. I think we've all had, even I've had ups and downs through the pandemic. And what's next for you then? I remember when we talked about how your day starts. Most of us wake up and we work out, we're having porridge or cornflakes. You were telling me that you woke up to a call about a hostage crisis.
Well, it's I have the benefit. I check a lot of the intelligence that comes on a daily basis. And I can relate that to all our different missions. And because I've checked that, I then reach out to country directors. So just now we're preparing to go into Mozambique. At the end of March, there was a terrorist attack in Mozambique in the northern province. So we're preparing to go in there to serve the people that have been displaced. So how do we do that and do that safely? And this morning when I checked the phone, there was an ambush and a kidnap just outside North Kivu in Congo, which is close to one of our missions. I reached out to the country director saying, is everything okay? Has this affected us? And he came back and he says, no, Andy, it hasn't affected us, but we were on that same road the day before. So the environments we work in are really difficult environments, and my job is to try and guide them how to navigate through these difficult environments. And I tend to take things on a very, very simple basis. It's about trying to raise their awareness. It's about trying to say, well, what can we anticipate? So you do that through all the intelligence that comes in. And then how do we avoid it? Can we go a different road, or can we travel at a different time, or can we use a different vehicle? All these tactics that you would use, and sometimes you've got to teach some tactics that you would normally associate with criminals. You know, particularly where the government's locked in the country and say, well, you can't get money at the bank. How do you get money? You need to smuggle it in. So how do you teach people to do that? And for me, I sometimes need to, finish my work and sit down and say, okay, right, well, I just did that today. I've never thought I'd ever have to do that before. But what the impact I find from that is that the staff on the ground all know who I am, right across all the 56 missions. And I've encouraged them to say, if you've got a question, just reach out. And over the years, they've started to reach out more. Some of the things are quite bizarre, dealing with an extortion that involving witchcraft in Africa. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, I know nothing about witchcraft, so I need to learn.
God, you in Scotland, we must know something about witchcraft. We've had plenty of them up here, apparently.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it's a fascinating job, and as I said, as a recruiter, I just wish it was one of those titles I got a chance to recruit for, but it wasn't to be, basically. But hey, listen, it's been an absolute privilege, and
thanks, Nick.
Keep doing the. I know how important this is to you, and when anybody refers to something as their calling, then. Not many of us can talk about a job that we all got because we thought it was a calling. So, respect to you, look after yourself, take care of your family, and, no doubt we will talk again soon.
Yeah, likewise, Nick.
All the best, my friend.
You take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.